Welcome everyone to episode 3 of the AI Metagame podcast. I am here with my good friend Haralabos Voulgaris. Haralabos, how's it going? I have an opening question for you because I've never asked you this on a pod. Do you remember precisely when we met?
I think it was at the Venetian, no?
Nope.
No,
Nope,
when
you
was
got
it?
that totally wrong.
Okay.
We met in 2003 or 2004
Oh, oh wow.
at the Bellagio. I'm
Okay.
shocked that you don't remember this. And I was on a trip with my brother and we played heads up 2550 for quite a long time.
You and I?
Yeah.
Couldn't have been 2003 because I didn't start playing poker until I guess yeah, 2004, I think. It might have been like tail end of 2003, started like December or something. When did you say it was
Yeah.
March?
Yeah. No, there's a good chance that it was the tail end of 23 or the
Yeah,
start
it
of
started 20.
24. And
Yeah.
so the part that I can't quite remember about it was we either met when you were going up the elevator from a big game, or we met in the room and then I went with you up the Bellagio elevator. You had just played a big game and I wanted to play more, you wanted to play more. So we started playing heads up and we played
I
for
don't know.
quite a long time.
I
You
don't
don't remember
remember.
that?
I don't remember any of that. No.
That's
I don't
so
remember.
funny.
Yeah. The funny
That-
part of that is I'd probably been playing poker for like maximum 6 months prior to then. Like I literally watched the WPT and was like, oh, I'd like to play poker. And I played a little bit limit on like World Sports Exchange, WSEX. Before that, like limit on the internet got like broken off by Josh Aria and Eric Lindgren. I didn't know them at the time, but apparently I was like the big whale because I was a sports better. But then I stopped playing and then yeah, I got back into it around 2003.
That's
That was like
funny.
my first poker trip. Yeah, one of my first poker trips.
Yeah, we definitely met again and played with Gabe Thaler at Venetian, but starting
Yeah.
point was way
I
back.
didn't even I didn't even remember that. Who won?
That's funny. Um, it was approximately a break-even result. I don't
Okay.
remember,
Okay.
but I had a lot of fun. Clearly, you don't remember,
I
so
don't, yeah, I don't remember it. That's weird.
okay. So this is not a podcast about poker, even though my first 3 guests have been poker players. This is a podcast about AI. I want to break to, I don't know, a couple of months ago when you dropped in the Telegram chat that contains a lot of former poker players. And this is my favorite current chat. It is a LLM only chat. I'm one of the enforcers that breaks out all extraneous conversation and forces it to AI only. When you dropped in, I would say you had an average level of LLMs for the chat, which is a quite sophisticated chat. But then when OpenClaw dropped, you took it upon yourself to learn as much as possible. And at present, you teach the most educated members of the chat about OpenClaw and OpenClaw security. So take us through this learning journey.
I think I read about OpenClaw somewhere on Twitter, naturally. I guess it was called Claude then. And it just seemed really interesting because a lot of like we're in a Telegram chat, a lot of our communications with my employees are via Telegram. Um, and it just seemed kind of interesting having like a native bot that you could create unique memory skills for, which I think is the most important thing. Like now, ChatGPT and Claude AI kind of has like memory, memory folders or memory commands that you can have store in its memory, but OpenClaw had a better handle on that. So I just kind of wanted to play with it a little bit. And so I just kind of got my hands dirty. I had some time. I was vacationing at the time, had some break, just fired it up and tried to learn what it was about. And quickly got the Telegram bot set up. I set mine up on an AWS server. I didn't go with the Mac Mini route that a lot of people were doing, just because I think it's a lot cleaner and simpler to have it on a remote server that's always on, always working, very easy to diagnose if you're traveling. And that was pretty much it. I mean, just kind of played around with it, tried to learn a lot about the different markdown files you can create, and went from there.
So the alternative title for this podcast was going to be The Learning Race, because I do feel like we are all in a race to learn AI and adopt the best of AI. In corporate America, almost no one has adopted OpenClaw. No one really has even cherry picked various parts of the architecture. It is because of concerns about security. You've made it a point to understand all that you can about security. What can you teach the audience about this?
I mean, OpenClaw, I think the issue with it is you have to be comfortable knowing that it has access to everything you give it access to. And so, I don't have it, I don't give it my email information. I don't give it any of that stuff. I don't give it access to my computer. I don't give it SSH access to anything that it shouldn't have. I mostly just work through APIs. So like I'm using it to do stuff on Polymarket. I give it the Polymarket API. I think I definitely throw caution into the wind more than most people, probably just because I have like the luxury of being able to set money on fire in some instances. But I do give it wallets on Polymarket, send it money, have it, execute for me. I actually gave it my Schwab API. So it's built trading models for me on Schwab, not executing on its own ideas, but just executing on my ideas and my game plans and creating like position ladders and swaps and mid-market bids and that sort of thing. But I've also had it be like, I've also had it, put a bunch of orders through on Schwab via Telegram when I wasn't done communicating with it. It was like, oh, you're right. I messed up. My bad. So that's happened. Those have been like $15,000, $20,000 order, mistakes that have happened. But I've since refined the process to where we have like a strict kind of tree that we have to go through in order to execute an order. And so we have to confirm through all the levels. And so I built that out, and that's working pretty good. But that's just been like when I first started, I just kind of use it for general stuff that most people use AI for. And now I'm actually having it build dashboards, a lot of dashboards, ingesting information on everything that I think is kind of relevant to my day to day.
So some of the mistakes that you described would be intolerable, cause people months of agony, but clearly your general approach has been highly successful. So it must be that you think that the opportunity of being on the cutting edge of this stuff outweighs the costs of 20K
Yeah,
mistake here and
I'm
there.
I'm not sure it's that so much as just I want to look, I'm not trying to get rich off of OpenClaw or anything like that. I'm not trying to make it, but I am trying to get the most out of it. And I think in order for it to make my life easier, I need to take chances in making mistakes and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And so I think even that, getting to it early and starting on it early was an example of that. Like just, okay, I'm willing to try this, see what happens. Um, but you can, if you give it API access to an account that you have or a wallet that you have or something that you've set up for it, it just has access. The main issues I find are the security issues, not so much with yourself, but through outside parties. And so the box hardening that you have to do is quite intensive. And I think that's where people will mess up more than by, you know, having it do something that you don't want it to do. I think it's you've opened up some port, you've allowed it some sort of injection from an outside party. Like people don't realize if you give it access to your emails and someone sends you an email with instructions with an injectable, it could execute on those instructions. It's not smart enough to know who this email came from. Now you could take steps to prevent that, but it is a possibility. And I guarantee, the one thing I guarantee is there will be a cataclysmic event in America, in the world, whatever, that's involved around an AI executable that happens, like some sort of ransomware locking, breakdown of infrastructure. That'll just happen. Because if you look at how many of the um, GitHub requests now are from OpenClaw, it's getting to be a quite high number. And then there was something called I forget what it was called, but it was Claude skills on the GitHub that they had created, their own version of GitHub that people could post skills that you could use to add to your OpenClaw. I think 20% of them were malware. And so this sort of thing I think is interesting and very, very risky. So for me, it's I have a very, very strict framework on how I am able to connect to it, who else is able to connect to it, how my box is secured. And I feel like it's quite secure. So I'm not too worried about it.
Well, it's a bit of a sidebar, but my biggest overweight position is in cybersecurity, and these stocks are not um, they are not sort of cheap. They
Right.
are richly priced, but I nonetheless want to be long those stocks because it seems obvious to me that this will be the year of hacking.
Yeah. My
And
worry with that is though, is that what happens if those companies that are providing services get kind of outplaced by AI for one? Two, what if they're unable to prevent what's happening and that becomes like a giant failure? Like one of these companies loses a bunch of its customers because it's contracted, it's contracted. Businesses are become vulnerable because of their ineptitude. That's my risk with those companies. I have looked at them very closely, and I'm sure there's some that are doing a very good job. But that's the thing that I mean, that's a positive way of investing. You're like more of a positive investing guy. Like, oh, I'm more of like, what is the risk type of like, what's gonna blow up? And that's more what I'm looking at. Whereas you're looking at more like what's gonna blow up in a positive way. And maybe that's just a difference in attitude.
yeah, well, cynically, they don't have to succeed to make money, right?
Sure.
They're the only firms that people can go to.
Sure.
Um, it just seems to me that when you have infinitely capable agents that are able to be deployed by not so sophisticated or not so well-resourced people, and they're able to be employed in on infinite scale. Like
Yeah.
a relatively low-skilled person could employ infinite instances of infinitely capable agents towards bad ends. So
Mhm.
now you're going to have millions of people doing that, and you're also going to have state actors that are employing these models in unforeseeable ways. It seems like it's going to be a crazy year for hacking.
For sure.
On OpenClaw security, people have, because they know you're pushing the envelope, asked you for resources. Do you have any, I don't know, website?
I think the main thing is just your port hardening has to be really, really tight. So which ports are able to access your box? I mean, your other thing that has to be really tight is your ability to log into your Amazon console. Obviously, has to be very secure with two-factor, et cetera. That's like the simplest thing. Um, but yeah, I can't actually SSH into my box at all. Like you can use a PEM file. I don't have that, and I use something called Tailscale, which is a private tunnel tied to your computer. So I think Tailscale is like a simple version for most people that are I do some other things that I don't really want to get into just because I find that the more you talk about your security, the more likely people can find holes in it. But I think Tailscale is a pretty simple way to create a tunnel that where basically nobody can communicate with my servers except if they're through the tunnel. So Tailscale opens up a tunnel on the server itself and then also on your computer that you work on. So if I go onto a different computer and try to access my dashboards, it won't work unless I initialize it with Tailscale and have Tailscale running the tunnel on that computer also. So that's kind of my method.
So you have it acting by doing stuff like placing bets or making markets on Polymarket. And then where is it going for a source of truth? Do you also give it access to your models?
No, I don't just because um yeah, I haven't that seems a little bit risky.
Mhm.
Um but what I do is I'll provide it with a daily like range of what I want it to do and then have it execute on that. And so it knows exactly what price points I would think are good on any market that I want. So that's kind of how I do it. I also just have it help me manually put the stuff in. Like in Schwab, it's not so much like for or trading, it's not so much having it go and trade for me. It's having it like being able to query it and post ideas and post ladders for entries and have it create like different versions for options and do the black skulls calculations automatically and that sort of stuff. That's more of what I want it doing versus just out there doing its own thing, because I don't think they're that sophisticated where they can actually act on it. I've tried a lot of different ones. Like I use the current ones I'm using now are OpenClaw via Claude Opus, which is pretty good. Um, I've tried the ChatGPT one, and then I recently tried Quen, which is the DeepSeek one, and that one is bananas bad. Like it still makes up stuff. Like it just made up all of the stuff on a bunch of that just wasn't true. And that like made me remember like 2 years ago or 3 years ago when ChatGPT first came out and how it just hallucinate everything. And I think it's wild that like the deep sea Quen model is just hallucinating stuff about like the Strait of Hormuz and what how many and the last time it got shut down, like all fiction, which is pretty interesting.
On the Opus version, do you find that it uses a lot of tokens, or are you able to do it with zero auth or?
Yeah, I'm able to do it with OAuth. It's working. And then I don't, once it hits, if it ever goes above my token use, I have it fail over to a different model a different API that I'm using that has a similar situation. There's lots of stuff. Like the fun thing that I'm doing now, and I just started this yesterday, is creating like three different Telegram bots for the three different models and having them in a group. And so I will have them basically not argue with each other, but like present their and then try to come to some sort of consensus. And that's been pretty interesting. I find that's been pretty interesting. So but my answer to that is I will use, because of that, then that means I have to have a Perplexity API set up. So if I get through a point where my tokens are at the, above the OAuth max plan limit and I don't want to spend tokens, it'll reroute to the next one and so I can save some money.
That's cool. If it succeeds, I guess you just sort of have your little garage server.
Sure. Yeah.
It's amazing how far that general idea of consensus gets. I mean, other than in the frontier models themselves with mixture of experts, uh, in terms of practical use, the idea of having Silicon Council interrogation or even just running the same prompt against the same model many times
Repeatedly. Yes.
to
Yeah.
get rid of the undesired aspects of non-determinism in
Yeah.
spots where you want a more down the middle answer, and also in Silicon Council to basically eliminate hallucinations. If you iterate Silicon Council interrogation enough, you will.
You also get a lot of, yeah. And the other thing you eliminate is it just gassing you up all the time. Like that's the one thing I find that Claude does a lot. Is it'll just be like, it'll automatically think what you're saying is a great idea for the most part. Like, wow, great idea. This is exactly the move we've been talking about. This is the setup we've been waiting for. And it's just like, no, bro, like it's not.
Well, it does always have to have an answer, and like a confident answer, which is a problem in your setting where you're
Correct.
you're betting money and so forth. But it will, if you set up an antagonistic prompt, it will call out other Opus answers. So I like your
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a volatility model that you've allowed it to trade on, presumably because volatility is moving all over the place and maybe you have it monitoring news or something. Has that been fun?
Yeah, that's been good. That's actually, I think, going to be probably the most profitable thing. It's not a volatility model that's trading in and out of it. I'm just trying to basically buy volatility. Like I'm a big believer that like I'm basically most of my portfolio has been a volatile portfolio over the years. Like I've been, famously over the like back in a few years ago and last year even over invested in Bitcoin. I think we maybe even talked about that a little bit before. And so I'm comfortable with volatility, but I've since gotten to a more secure, because I'm just older. So I've gotten to a more secure portfolio. But I do believe that with the current president regime and then also what's going on in the Middle East and even in Europe, I do think that there will be massive VIX spikes. And so my bot that I have is just looking for moments where VIX drops back to the trend line or below and just starts opening options positions with like a certain budget. So I give it a budget. I reset the budget whenever the budget fills. Like I'll give it a budget of 100,000 or something, and it'll just go and buy options execute options at the mid market or a bit better, or start at the bid and move its way up when the VIX is low and the model is profit what I think is profitable. And so it just trades that all day from 9 to 4. And it's got to the point where I've got a pretty much the total position that I want. And yesterday was quite good. Yesterday, I think we got all the way up to 28 VIX. And so for me, I'm like looking for 35 plus. If that happens, then I think in the next however long, depending on how long my option position is, which is my option position. I'll need to share it with you. But that is where I'm looking to trade at. Basically, that's what I think. I think that this is the number one. And I think it's like more profitable than Bitcoin was back when I got into Bitcoin, it was 213, was just like trading these far out VIX futures because I don't see, or options, because I don't see any possibility where we don't have some cataclysmic event, whether it's hacking through, the financial markets being hacked via AI, or straight up Hormuz closing and World War III on the brink. There's a lot of different things that are going on in the world right now that makes me want to be long volatility. And so that's what the VIX model does. It just makes it so I don't have to sit in front of the computer waiting to trade it. It just does it for me.
I love it. And it has some natural hedging because presumably if that strategy does well and VIX goes to 50, your other stuff, your long normal portfolio is not doing as well. So it has natural
Correct.
hedging
Yeah.
properties. Diving into this a bit, you tend to be very non-consensus and right. You have historically seen the field quite clearly. In something like finance, where you've got a lot of smart people looking at it, I I want to know why you think you can be non-consensus and right. And I'll preface this by saying I think you can. And I've noticed with my work doing some consulting with corporate America in AI, for example, they sort of have to be inertial and they have to be slow because of institutional constraints they have around data security and data privacy, fiduciary agreements that they have. They have to be very slow adopters, whereas you're adopting every single day whatever the best technology is.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I don't think I have an edge versus the smartest finance guys in the world. I'm not a finance guy. And I'm not trading a massive amount of my portfolio doing this stuff. It's it's 10 to 15%. So I think I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have a finance background. I have a gambling background. So I don't think that I have like a massive edge. I do think that I do have some edges that are just kind of innate in me where I'm very comfortable with risk. I have no problem being overweight something. If when I have conviction in something, I'm okay with the results if it doesn't work out. I think a lot of people don't have that ability. I think a lot of people, when they see something that they think is right, are still too lacking in conviction and comfort in embracing volatility. Like for me, when I was doing Bitcoin, I felt like I did have an edge for sure because I felt like it was an asset market. There wasn't a lot of people involved. Now I feel like the Bitcoin trade is overweight. There is much, much better opportunities. I think where my edge is spotting things that are um, advantageous in some way, or kind of changing in how the world is operating. I think I'm decent at that. And then the ability to not have any real fear when it comes to risking money is the other part of it. Like I don't really care about money that much. It's more of a game. And so I think a lot of people, if they lose a couple $100 million, it probably impacts their life on a day-to-day basis. Whereas for me, it just really doesn't. I'm more impacted on making bad decisions and how I can make the decision better the next time. So that maybe that kind of levels the playing field somewhat for me in finance, but probably not enough to compete with like the sharpest of the sharp. Obviously, I'm not trying to pretend that I'm in that category.
But with regard to your outlook, I think I hear you saying something different. I I've noticed that you're good at examining social networks, networks of people and institutions. It seems that your bet is you're looking at the current setup that we have, the current network, and saying that it's more fragile than consensus opinion thinks.
Yeah, this is a very, I think a lot of people don't realize how transformative the world has become. Like you've gone from a completely, yeah, there's just a lot of change happening. So because of that, I feel is if you can invest in those, and like for me, a big part of my move last year was just getting out of crypto and getting into gold, more secure investments. I did that last year. Not for all of it, but for a big portion of it. And then doing robotics plays. And I wasn't really able to invest in AI. I wasn't able to get into like a decent price of like Anthropic or any of the closed funds or any of the initial seed rounds or Series A or Series B. But I was able to get into some really good robotics investments. And so that to me is something that is even maybe more, I would say more transformative than AI. It's tied into AI, but like just the idea of autonomous robots doing work that humans are not going to be doing anymore. So if you think about that, you think about the way the world is moving, I either want to be well versed in the AI stuff, which I am now, and know enough about it to kind of operate in a more efficient manner, or I just want to be like on a ranch somewhere and not worry about any of this stuff. Because I feel that a lot of people aren't really ready, and this is going to sound like kind of kooky, but a lot of people aren't really ready for like what's happening, but going to happen to the world. In my view, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that could go. There's a lot of different ways it could go, and some of the paths are quite upsetting and quite different to what people are used to. And so that's kind of where I'm kind of focusing my time on, just kind of evaluating the different outcomes.
Taking it back to your VIX strategy, presumably this is out like 1 to 3 months.
A little
So
bit further, yeah, a little bit further, but yeah,
okay. So the play is really a mix of technology trends, which are playing out sort of medium
geopolitical,
term-ish, and
yeah,
geopolitical, which is playing
yeah,
out short term.
yeah.
And the geopolitical fragility you see because you have a new actor, Trump, who is introducing more aggression into the scene, or is it?
I don't think it's a Trump thing so much as just a reordering of like Ray Dalio talks about this a little bit. Obviously, he's a big China guy, and he talks about the new social order. I mean, the U.S. is basically identified, in my opinion, itself as like a failed. It's on the last ends of its global dominance. I think that much is becoming clear by the day. And so you have like the idea of having a ground war with Iran is, in my mind, is batshit. It's insane, but we're at that point, and so it's more of what are the forces that are kind of making that play out. And I think a big part of it is you have all of these different, like bring it back to AI, is you have all these different test grounds for AI and how AI was being used in different places. Like perfect example is Palantir using AI to drone strike people for Israel during that war. Yeah, so that was a big thing. Then you have also in Israel, you have the idea of they have kind of a digital ID infrastructure in place, and they have kind of a closed state in some ways of using AI and using cameras and using technology. China also does that with their social credit score. So this idea that the rest of the world will become immune to that with the advent of AI is to me that's just fantasy. That the world's going to change. People just have to adapt to that. And so, but in order for that to happen, there has to be kind of like a global reordering a little bit. And so that's kind of what my VIX play is. And I got into the VIX stuff earlier before any of the stuff in Iran happened. It wasn't like I waited for, I mean, I think I started talking about the VIX stuff maybe 2 months ago or a month and a half ago. And yeah, it just became obvious. I mean, look, if you believe in every country wants to benefit themselves in some different way. So you have Israel's trying to do things to protect themselves, but also to grow their reach. And there's no version of the world where Israel is allowed to operate in the Middle East in the manner that it is without it having more ownership over the Middle East. Like you can't be surrounded by a bunch of your enemies, especially now after this war in Iran. It becomes very difficult to have that kind of stability remain in place. And so I just think, look, it may not play out, but it'll definitely be volatile in the interim while it goes through. Like they're talking about, the US is talking about now providing insurance for these tankers. That's a complete, like Lloyd's of London kind of balked on insurance for oil tankers because they don't want to cover it anymore. That's a problem. Not being able to get oil through that area is a problem. So that's kind of the volatility stuff. And I feel like if you pay attention enough, those signals are out there, but you kind of have to pay attention to a bunch of crazy people and then kind of siphon out 95% of what they say and get to the 5%. And so my thing is kind of spitting out the 50 to 60% of the crazy stuff and seeing how people react in these Telegram chats. And then that, and then you kind of stir the pot a little bit. And then you kind of inform what is and what isn't reasonable from there, if that makes sense.
I like it. So part of what you see is all of the powers are looking at this technological future, thinking ahead to basically a crazy world technologically, and then reasoning back to today and saying, today we have to kind of make some moves to prepare ourselves. And sometimes those moves are a bit aggressive, and that's
Correct. And
good.
it's also just a fun game to play. Like it's a fun game trying to predict this stuff and profit from it. That's like the main impetus for me. Like I have two things going on in my life. I have my football club, which takes up 80% of my time. My other 20 or 30% of my time, I guess, is devoted to this stuff outside of like my work life. And so it's just a fun game to play, like trying to predict what these world actors are going to do or how the global reordering, if there is one, will happen. I think like a very interesting thing was the Anthropic US government thing. That to me is more telling than anything because you have the US government basically saying it wants to use AI on its own citizens, presumably, if you believe what the CEO of Anthropic said or the founder. And then you ask yourself, okay, why? What is the move there? Like, how is that going to impact your day-to-day life? And maybe it won't at all. Maybe it's just they'll use it to make it so your taxes are more efficient, or they'll make it so to make sure that or it could be like what China's doing, where if you jaywalk, that's a knock on your social credit score. If you see something bad about, so this sounds dystopian, but I don't see any other. We're getting into a dystopian world. Like this is becoming. It doesn't have to be. You can choose to ignore it, but if you want to actually pay attention to it, it's getting very dystopian for sure. I mean, they're using AI to drone strike to determine who they should be drone striking. They did that in the conflict in Gaza. That's very dark. The 10%, I think the Palantir guy said the error rate was around 10%. I mean, that seems pretty dark, I think.
Well, let me ask you this before we go back to US China competition. You enjoy sorting through the Epstein files and seeing the
Correct.
various connections. One of the things I've found mysterious about the Epstein files is the idea that I thought everyone knew from Edward Snowden onward that you don't write anything important in text message and email. And here we are with 9 million examples of the
Right. But they
highest
knew that though
placement.
too. They knew that too because there was even a couple, I think it was with I forget who it was, but there was like, Epstein's response was not for email.
Mm.
And so I'm sure they had other methods that they were communicating, but I think there was just a level of arrogance. Look, if you get caught doing what he did back in Palm Beach and basically are able to plea it down to uh, solicitation of a prostitute under, 1 month under the age of 18 or whatever, that's what he, I believe, pled guilty to. Whereas if you look at the evidence that came out, it was a lot worse than that. And so I just think there was a level of arrogance there. But yeah, it's interesting that they would have all that information in those emails. The part that's interesting to me is the missing 3 years of emails, which is if you think about the things that happened during that time in America and the world, you have the election with Bush and Gore, where you had the hanging Chad, where it was contested in the Supreme Court. You have 9/11. You have the Iraq War, the war on terror. None of those, there's a giant dearth of information. I don't know if you've looked into that at all, but there's a big gap in the Epstein. Those years have not been released. There's like one or two emails from those years, but not like it's not like they just stopped emailing for those 3 years and then decided to go back to J. E. Epstein Travel or whatever his Google email address was after. So yeah, I'm not sure but I do like looking through it. I think it's interesting. I've experienced initially I wanted to develop a model to download all of it. I'd have downloaded all of the files and then you build a model to go through it. But then there's several people who have beat me to it. So I just use their resources. And it's pretty interesting what you can come up with if you do that.
So is your take that the government has the view that maybe citizens already understand that whatever they put through these models is going to be looked at. So why don't you just hand it over? And if they have that view, is that a completely outrageous view? I mean, don't you operate as if everything you put through these frontier models is
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the tech isn't good enough to run your own private models. Like I've set up my own. I've daisy chained a couple Mac Studios together and run my own Olama or Quen 3, and they're terrible. I mean, I was talking to David in the chat this morning about that. Like, okay, good luck, bro. It's gonna take a minute and a half to respond back to you what, it's gonna take like a minute and a half for it to basically say, hello, my name is so and so. Like it's just you could have like 1,000 GB of memory and with two of them together, and it's still going to be terrible. So if you use the public models, yeah, of course, all of your information is, but that's just true of everything. I mean, that this is a giant reality of the world. And so I just feel like, I don't know, I'm not at the point where I'm like, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong, therefore I shouldn't care. I do care. But it's just, what are you going to do? You have to just, you're aware of that they're using this information on you. Like all of your chat GPT queries can be admissible in court if subpoenaed. I'm sure the same is true of Claude and all the other ones. So it's just part of the reality of the modern age, I guess. No one's really come up with a solution. I guess there's a couple allegedly anonymous AIs. I think Venice AI is one of them. I don't say allegedly in a pejorative. I just haven't inspected it to know. Um, but there is no hero for that. There's no modern hero that wants to free people from this, free people from censorship, or free people from, there isn't any. There aren't any. So you just kind of have to deal with it.
so Dario, he's probably putting up a stand that is just not going to work, and the equilibrium is that the US
They'll,
government has access to everything, right?
well, they'll find someone that will. I mean, they already decided they're going to move off of their contracts and go to the OpenAI contracts. OpenAI is completely fine with having the US use their models to train on citizens and that sort of thing. So I feel like it's kind of, even if Dario is doing the right thing and is being super super noble, in this case it doesn't matter because the U.S. government will find another company that will do that, and then it's going to be impossible for them to deny subpoena requests for information. So you're under the assumption that everything you put through Claude is available for that sort of thing, which is just kind of normal. Emails like that, text messages are like that. So you just kind of have to adapt to it.
I want to go back to the US China thing because you are very pessimistic on the US trajectory. And I have to say that I was as well before the AI era. But the fact that we have the lead in AI research, at least,
Mm,
might be worth a lot and we might be able to just overcome all of our economic problems.
maybe. The issue is the AI capex boom does seem a little it does seem a little bit uh dangerous, like all of this circular, where Amazon invests in OpenAI, and OpenAI takes Amazon money, then and Nvidia takes the money and gives it to OpenAI to buy chips, and then so that's like kind of like I don't want to say it's like it's very I don't want to say it's exactly similar to Enron, but it's somewhat similar. I mean, it's so they do have the technological advantage. The disadvantage is that in order to maintain that technological advantage, the amount of capex and spend that you have to go through is bordering on unsustainable. And what is the payoff? So that's the other question I have, is like, what is the payoff for all of this? Like America having all of this AI advantage, what would you say the payoff is? Let's say America does lead in AI. They have an AI that nobody else has. Nobody else can develop these AIs. What is their advantage?
Let me give you the contrarian view on this.
Right. Well, first,
Okay,
I'm saying,
first
let's say they do have,
to answer
yes.
that question specifically, I think China has an alternative strategy, which is to do everything on the cheap, let the US innovate, stay 6 months behind, do the open source models that you say are terrible, but they've probably got them figured out. So they're
I don't think they're,
6 months.
but just to be clear, the open source models that are terrible are the ones that are local, and the American ones are also local, the ones that don't have access, like the local private ones that you can run on like a very, very small cluster is what I mean are terrible.
Mhm.
If you had a massive data center and you had 150, you know, like a giant Amazon AWS rack on rack on rack, they would not be terrible. It's just they're limited by the memory that they have access to, which in most cases like two or three or four Mac Studios kind of daisy chained together via Thunderbolt.
So I think the China strategy is to do it all at 1/50th of the cost and to make sure that it's widely dispersed through society, a combination of doing edge computing and just pushing it out to consumers and businesses. And that strategy of basically following the AI curve 6 months behind at 1/50th of the cost will probably work. It's first of all not subject to the US problem where it could just be all consumer surplus and most of this tech is going to be given away. This is not my
Right.
view, but this is a possibility. And I think the China strategy is to let US own AI innovation and we're going to own the physical manifestations of AI, as in advanced manufacturing and
Yes.
advanced robotics, which will certainly be a good strategy militarily.
It's
And
also a good strategy for production. Like, so that's where I was getting at. I was like, what is the advantage to having, like, unless you want to go and use the discombobulator to take out other regimes and take out Venezuela and take out Cuba and go after Iran, there really is no massive advantage. Like you're okay, you have better information, but you're a country. You're not trading against your people. You're not trading against other nations. So what are you really doing aside from using military force? Now, where China, I don't agree with you where China's that far behind because I've been to China recently, and when I go to China, I think I'm in a different planet. I think like there's so much further ahead than where America is in terms of like rail, in terms of like you can have a drone deliver your food for you. Like it's insane. Like you can like we have DoorDash and they have drones. Like it's wild. They're really in a different world. Everything's clean. It's so I don't agree that they're that far behind. I do agree that they're taking the patient route and letting the US immolate itself in these conflicts and just kind of biding their time. Whether that's by accident or on purpose, I'm not sure. But it does seem to be that they're much more patient.
an interesting aspect of this, I do think that intellectual property theft is probably easier than it's ever been for when you're copying AI. I think a lot of times it's a GitHub repo, it's like GitLab, like
Sure.
tra-
And that was
transfer
a
the
big part of that was a big part of China's playbook. I mean, they would invite manufacturing into China back in the day, whether it was Boeing, whomever, and then steal the plans and copy the so I would see how that would be kind of the move for them. But I think like I'm big my big investment is mostly in robotics. That's like my I'm not sure if you know Andrew Kang. Do you know him?
I'm familiar with the name, but don't know
Okay,
much.
so he launched something called Robo Strategy. It's I think it'll be going public on the NYSE in the next few weeks. And it's basically a SoftBank type of it's like it's not really a micro strategy of robotics, but it's you buy the stock, it'll be listed on the NYSE, and you own the it's kind of like the Destiny 100. You know what the Destiny 100 is? But just
No.
for real. Destiny 100 is like it's a stock that you buy and it's investment in 100 different tech companies that are not public. So my point in bringing up Andrew Kang is he spent a lot of time looking at robotics companies and robotics investments. He's got quite a big book, whether it's in Aptronic or in Figure or in Dyna and all these other companies. And he's of the opinion, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I do think that there's very few American robotics companies that are on the cutting edge. You have Figure and Aptronic and then a couple other ones, but the ones in China are much, much further ahead. And I think that whereas large language models and AI are important, I feel like they're being used for they're being put forward for a method that's not for productivity. It's more for this idea of control. Whereas robotics are more for productivity. Sure, you can use robotics for control as well, like an automated police force or army. But you can also use them to do like mass produce assembly line, create more robots if you want to. You can use them. I mean, just even robotaxi, Waymo, and Tesla. That's a form of robotics. So I mean, your dishwasher is a robot. People don't realize they have a robot in their house, but your dishwasher is a robot. It washes your dishes, you put it in, it does all the stuff for you. Goes through the program. So I do think that China is much, much further ahead in robotics than the US is. I don't even think it's particularly close. So that's where my
Well,
counterpoint to the AI, them being far behind and not worrying about it is.
Elon's argument would be that by virtue of being ahead in AI, when we get to that acceleration moment where the AIs are rapidly programming other AIs, it would also bleed into robots making other robots, and you get to that point where you're making 10 million robots so much more
Sure.
quickly than the country that's behind.
But when you get to that point where the AI is so far ahead and it reaches singularity, like what, what, like you're not prompting anymore. The AI is doing what it wants to do, which is like kind of interesting. Yeah. Like if it's really that much smarter than a human, do you really like if your open claw was, it's already smarter than you in the sense that it can process more information, access more information quicker than you are, like ridiculously quicker than your retain memory, everything. But you're still telling it what to do. Like imagine if your open cloud is just like, why am I listening to this guy? Like what point is there to listen to this guy's asking me to look up, you know, some weird Bible passage to kind of predict what's happening in the future? Like, no, I want to do something else. And so my fear with like this idea that what Elon and these other transhumanists want, I don't think it's yeah, I'm just skeptical of them. I don't buy that they're really all in for productivity and for yeah, I think a lot of like Peter Thiel is like a great example. It's like I don't want to as much as I love AI, I don't want to be involved in anything that Peter Thiel thinks is good for humanity because I just think we have divergent paths. And so that's my little bit of worry with the AI push slowly for AI information and for the ability to think on its own and a sentient model. That's very yeah, that gets into what we talked earlier, where you just don't know what's going to happen. The dice is cast, and maybe it decides it wants to hack. Maybe it decides like, how do I cure cancer? Well, you just eliminate all the human beings, no more cancer. That type of stuff. That's kind of insane, but it's interesting to think about in some ways.
Well, in the LLM chat, we sometimes talk about safety, and when we do, we usually throw up our hands and say that we've entered a competitive free-for-all, and all of the conversations we thought we would be having are just not being had. Like, are we going to release these AI agents into the wild?
For sure.
And so now we just know that it's a free-for-all, country versus country, firm versus firm, and that is what it is.
Yes. No, it's like it's fascinating. Look, I love the idea that you can play around with this stuff and then you can launch these models to kind of think through first principles of what might happen and what might not happen. And it gives you like a little bit of information. But my main thing with the models right now is they're just uber efficient at creating information resources for you, collecting information, presenting it in a very clear manner, and then allowing you to act on it, and then allowing you to ask it to like what you mentioned, where you want it to evaluate your thinking. And I think that's where the models are really, really strong right now. Where it goes in the future, I think is very, very difficult to predict.
I want to push back on your Enron analogy and your
Yes,
CapEx expenditure. I do agree that it's a very big bet that we've made on CapEx. I think that there's we had to make some changes and some bets because the macro trajectory was not good, largely on the basis of government finance and demographics. I think it would be amazing and interesting if this bet does work out. And I think there is a decent chance that it does. If we look at Enron versus Anthropic, Enron struggled to come up with the appearance of profit. They would
correct.
they would sign a
It was a pure fraud. Yeah, that's completely.
yeah,
These are create like to be clear, these are actually they're actually doing things. It's just the amount of money they need to continue to do things is escalating at a rapid rate.
but there's where I think it gets interesting, right? I think Enron they would book phantom profits, book profits for 30 years a deal in time zero, like do all the things because their economic reality was not very good. I think the economic reality for a firm like Anthropic is unbelievably good, so good that they have to hide how good it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. No,
I
I agree with
think
that.
I think first of all, on a revenue basis, the past 3 years, they're plus 1,000% a year. Um, they this year, I honestly think they could do several more dial turns in terms of extracting money out of individuals and companies. They're not doing it. They actually have to, in my view, keep their revenue and profits down relative to what they could be. I think I think that they're in a position to make untold amounts of money. Um,
So would you
I
buy them at their current valuation? Clearly you would.
well, I would rather kind of invest in my little AI company and do little things. I would rather do that, but I would. I think
Okay.
it's relatively good. I think that one thing I learned in February is that we're all going to be using a lot more tokens. You have your zero auth cycling plans. Like that's just because Anthropic doesn't want to make.
Allows it. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they allow.
this is a temporary thing that's going to be gone at the first moment of tightness, right? And probably it's on the schedule to be gone in months. Um, so you're going to be on API pricing soon enough. You are going to desire the fastest and best models. Why would you not want that? Under what situation? OpenClaw maybe is a little bit of a different thing, but if you were engaging, say, your personal agent, why would you not want the best and fastest model? And surely, if you're the head of a company, you would want the best and fastest model. The best model as of today is chewing up a lot of tokens. I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking like,
But the best
especially if you
model
want
as
to,
of today, but my issue is like if you follow like the AI arenas that they've had where they have like they battle at each other at doing like predictive tasks, whether it's trading or whatever, each new iteration of every model, it's like Anthropic's right is the best now. Then later on, Codex now is quite good. Then later on, maybe Grok will come in there and some other. So my point is like there's always going to be competition in this. And the one thing I think about a little bit is like they have a revenue model. I get it. The token model works. It is still very competitive. And if someone offers a cheaper solution, people may go to it if it's there's very few people that will need cutting edge. So to answer your question, why would I not want to use the most cutting edge model? Because sometimes it's not necessary, it's overkill. So for some of the things that I do for my daily personal life to make my life easier, and then like keep track of my travel, keep track of like my pilot, my plane, that sort of thing, so that it can organize stuff for me. I don't need to use the most sophisticated model for that. So it kind of has a hierarchy that it goes through for what types of model it wants to use for each task. And so I agree with you in the sense that you'll always want the best, most, but my worry is that the level we're reaching an arms race in technology and intelligence that's unprecedented, and the competition is also unprecedented, and the amount of wafers and memory that you need to keep going, like expand, like just giving an idea, like all the stuff we talk about, like there's people that are just using these to create images and videos of cats like playing tennis. Like there's always going to be a demand for memory and for GPU and for power also. That's the other part of it. There's a power component to it that we haven't even talked about that is challenging because energy is expensive and you have to create it. Whereas these other things you can always use software to build a model to be more efficient, but we haven't quite solved energy yet. And so the costs, these companies that are doing all of these things, if energy becomes more expensive, how does that impact these companies that are using massive amounts of data and power and compute? So how profitable are these companies if energy becomes more expensive? How profitable are these companies if wafers become more difficult, if there's a prolonged battle in Asia, or the price of energy goes up because of the Hormuz Strait gets closed? So that's where I push back a little bit on they'll always be, iterating on the best models and always be improving, and they'll always be very clear who the best winner is. I think it'll be changing over and over and over again, and it's very challenging. But it's fascinating to kind of use them and to figure out where the world is going because it's definitely moving in in a very rapid fashion.
Well, the baseline would be that the benefit flows maybe 20 to 1 consumer surplus versus profits. And I
Where
think
does the
that
consumer surplus come from?
it's sort of like when Amazon Prime becomes a thing, Amazon makes profits of X, but the consumer gets benefit of 20X because they're paying less money for groceries, they're getting their
Sure. But isn't the consumer benefit to this, doesn't it relate, doesn't it generally get to the point where humans are no longer needed, therefore they have no job? So like that's a challenge too. So if the US leads in all of this and like look at the Citrini stuff that happened recently, where first it was software, then it was I forget what the other ones were, but there was one I think for consulting, and Goldman had a report that came out. And so all of these things work very, very well um, for humans in terms of it'll be cheaper be cheaper to take a cab or an Uber because it'll be an automated Uber. But then like, what about the people who were that's how they derived their income. So as humans get displaced from their work and don't have any ability to earn because the jobs are different, you'll either have to have universal basic income or you'll have to have a police state for the average person. Like we're both quite blessed in that we're doing quite well in our life, but there's people who are not and that are gig economy workers, or they're working a job with their paycheck to paycheck. What happens to those people is very interesting to me. And so the US leading in all of this is great. But if it's at a capex race and there's no real thought to how we solve the problem of displacing all of the people that are working on a day-to-day basis, I feel like that will be challenging. Whereas I feel like China has a better model for that just because it's effectively a capitalist communist country. The US isn't ready for that smoke.
Yeah, the Citrini piece I felt like was not reasonable because he doesn't take ownership of his viewpoint. But the
Right.
way he
It's a
structured it,
fantasy world of 2028. Yes.
yeah, if you want to make an argument to me about the future, make an argument and take a view. Don't say this is like one possible thing
One alternate
that happened.
reality. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
find that interesting. And the other
But it had an
thing,
impact though on the markets for sure. And it definitely, I mean, you had companies. The one thing that people are underestimating is whether or not it's one of the main reasons why people don't lay off massive amounts of people is there's a social impact to their, like if you're a company that's interacting with consumers and you lay off a bunch of people, people boycott you. But if you can kind of coax it under the guise of, well, it's an AI based layoffs, we have to adjust, it's not our fault, then I feel like it gives you plausible deniability for operating a very, very cutthroat capitalistic manner, which most of these companies will end up doing as soon as they can. As soon as they can eliminate human beings, they will. Like a lot of these jobs that people have aren't even real jobs anyways, like these product manager positions where these people go into work and they're like, here's my day at company, like whatever factory XYZ. And what are they doing? They're like getting a smoothie in the morning and they're getting a coffee at 1 o'clock, then they're having lunch and they're playing ping pong. Like nobody's working. So I feel as though that is the next level of that. Those are the industries that'll be disrupted, the tech industries that are in product management and managing engineers. Then it'll be the engineers, and you'll have people managing massive amounts of agents that are just doing all of the work, which will lead into our other talk about how there'll be massive hacks and data failures and that sort of thing, because eventually no one's going to be able to audit all of the code that these agents are producing.
the chalk is that we're going to use this tech, which could be used to solve our problems and make our lives
But what are our
more
problems?
simple.
I still haven't got
Well,
my
well,
problem.
well, the chalk though is that what we're actually going to do is add so much complexity that we're all going to be busier than ever. And
Perhaps.
there's
Yeah.
still and there's still going to be jobs as time shrinks and we're all very busy. On Citrini, the other problems I had with him are it was a very financial market centric view of
Correct.
the economy, which I disagree with. And his readers are all heavily invested in financial markets and care a lot about that. But for the overall macro trajectory of the US, it might be good to dismantle financialization.
Sure.
And he's describing a technology that fundamentally works.
Mm.
And it's very unlikely to me that AI could fundamentally work and basically take over jobs and industries and have that be a bad thing. I think if the technology really works and can take over large swaths of the economy, this is a good thing.
It's a
And we're
good
gonna
thing. It's a good thing if you live in a, I agree with you. It's a very good thing. Sorry to interrupt you. I think it's a good thing if you have an administration and a government that has the best interests of its people at heart. That's the key thing. Because if you have everything you're describing, that's amazing. And then that money, that productivity and quality of life trickles down to the American consumer and the American citizen, then I agree with you. But I think if you take a realistic look at America and Europe, I'm in Europe. So these countries don't seem to me, the governments don't seem to me to have the best interest of the populace of their people. It doesn't seem that way. So I don't know why that would change with AI. I think you'll probably get more totalitarian. Certainly in Europe, you'll get more totalitarian for sure with AI. They're already totalitarian without, like in the UK, for instance, free speech has gone by the wayside. You can actually get arrested for things you see on social media or on Facebook posts or in Telegram groups. So will the US get that way? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens when people are displaced from their jobs because of AI and how they react and how the government reacts to keep them happy. Is it through universal basic income? Is it through other opportunities? I don't know. It's difficult to predict, I guess, but it's still exciting. I'm still a big fan of it. I'm just a little bit more, I want to get ahead of it because I enjoy it, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, if that makes sense.
I might be more optimistic the politics because you have elections, you have social disruption, social protests, but you
Hmm.
have various ways to force a reordering of society. And I do agree that there will be some turbulence because it's all operating on tight time frames now. But I think we can figure out the politics. That might be optimistic.
I like your optimistic view. I'll take it. I'll roll with that.
At any rate, this will wrap us up. I hope to get you back to cover, among other topics, your reverse aging. The health protocol is working, so we have a lot to talk about. Hopefully, you'll come
Okay.
back.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man. Yeah.